Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Furby's 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
Broadcasting to you live on 24 Saffron Street, Charlestown, Georgetown. This is Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. We're 25 minutes after 7 o'clock. We do apologize for the late start, but of course, it is Wednesday, and Wednesday we take things different, whereby we bring to you a program called Join the Oil Team and Have Your Say. This is the opportunity whereby you can call us with your questions, any concerns, and providing that we can give you the answer live and direct, we will. But if not, we promise to check on this and return to you as soon as possible, or to the next program we'll have the answers for you. But this evening we refer to them as the two oil queens. Mr. Lal is MIA this evening. He's unable to join us this evening. I'm pretty sure he's listening, and so he's left you guys in the capable hands of two beautiful young ladies. With that said, ladies, good evening. Just before I hand things over to you, immediately after their presentation, you can call us this evening on 226-745-324, 502-4749. Mr. Lal not here, so the mobile number rather you can call us on is 622-2222, and the drill. Running low on credit, just give us a call, and we are going to return that call to you. Ladies, with that said, good evening, and the floor is yours.
Good evening, Josh. And
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for joining us this week for what I'm sure will be a very enticing and educating discussion, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I must say it's really good to be back joining the team, although Mr. Lal is not here this evening with us. Davina and I do have quite a few interesting topics to go through this evening. We're going to keep things short and sweet, but in the same spirit, we invite you to call and share your thoughts with us. Even if you don't have questions, just call in, share your perspectives, because as we've been saying, this is a conversation where every person's opinion matters, and we want to hear from you. So I'm happy to be part of tonight's program again, yes, continuing this discussion. Davina, I'll leave the floor open to you now for you to make your opening remarks.
Thank you, Kiana. I just wanted to say good evening again. Namaste. Welcome to our viewers and listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in. Mr. Lal isn't here, but I send you greetings, and I thank you for joining us tonight on his behalf. We plan to educate you guys on the audit tonight. What we plan to share with you are some of our findings. We have finally laid hands on this audit report, the preliminary audit report that has been released on the US $1.6 billion expenses from ExxonMobil between the cost that they incurred between the years 1999 to 2017. And so, Kiana, I know you have written quite a few articles based on your findings in that document. So without further ado, I think we should go straight into those findings and start discussing some of those issues that were highlighted in that audit.
Thanks, Davina. One of the things I love about covering the oil and gas industry, you never know what you're going to be handed the following week.
Yes.
At one point, the focus was, and it continues to be, on, the flaws, some of the fatal flaws within the 2016 Stabroek Block production sharing agreement. And what we're examining now as journalists in the field are some of the findings, the preliminary findings in an audit that focuses on $1.6 billion in costs. Now, before we get into that, I wish to lay the groundwork on, who are really the players involved in this audit. Now, in November 2019, we had a British firm that was hired. That company is called IHS Markit Upstream. And it's a very well-known company in the oil and gas industry, not just for auditing, but for a number of other services. It provides analytical research. It's also known for putting together a very important forum called Sarah Week, which is like the Super Bowl of oil conferences, and that takes place in Houston. So they're responsible for that. And as many of you can probably recall, the Vice President, Dr. Barajagdio, was one of the speakers at that event. So IHS is a company that's been in the market, and it's well known to the oil and gas players. So we hired this company, Guyana, in 2019 to examine 18 years of expenses. And in those in that work that they were hired to do, we also have another layer of protection, and that layer of protection includes a team of technical officers from the Ministry of Natural Resources and the Guyana Revenue Authority, and we also have some help from the International Monetary Fund. So that team is responsible for going through the findings uncovered by IHS, and they would ensure that everything possible that they're supposed to do to protect our interests, that's been done. No effort has been spared. And on that note, Davina, while there is an audit report that we have our hands on, where we are able to see some of the findings uncovered by this company, this British company, we also have been able to access an internal document from the Guyana Revenue Authority, which shows the extent to which our people have been protecting our interests. We are able to get a front row seat as to what are some of the deficiencies our people have been highlighting, they've been finding in this audit report. And one of the stories that we did on this front examines the fact that the Guyana Revenue Authority has been able to flag 40 million US in expenses by ExxonMobil and its partners, and the fact that there was no transparency where these expenses are concerned. And the British auditor, based on the story that we've done, the British auditor simply said, hey, well, ExxonMobil has billed Guyana for X, Y, and Z, totaling 40 million US. It is completely covered under the agreement. There's no need for us to, be concerned about that because the PSC covers it. GRA and the technical officers of the Ministry of Natural Resources have said, hey, have you checked to see who exactly these materials are being purchased from? Are there related companies?
Correct.
Did you go as far as to probing to see what the original receipts are? Mm-hmm. Is it in keeping with market prices? Mm-hmm. So thankfully, we have that layer of protection that is there to ensure we're not just rubber stamping what this British auditor is providing us. Another interesting finding, Davina.
Kiana, just before you move on, if I may, I just wanted to jump in here on one of the articles that I actually covered. Mm-hmm. The same audit report, it flagged that $240 million in contracts were sole sourced, meaning that there was no sort of tendering process for the contracts that they awarded. They just went ahead and selected specific
wanted.
contractors and decided, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give you that. So the auditor flagged this, and I just wanted to read a part from you, from the report. It says, of the single source procurement awards, EPGL, which is the operator of the Stabroek Block and ExxonMobil's subsidiary, it failed to demonstrate the competitiveness of the rates within the contract. So this was of that amount of the contracts that they awarded. They said 28 million of this should be removed from the cost bank as they fail to show competitiveness. So this was just relating to part of what you just told the listeners. So just to enlighten you guys, $28 million in contracts, they failed to show how competitive these were. And as Mr. Lal would say, this, guys, I need you to remember and bear in mind that these are our resources, and just think about what this amount of money could be doing for you and your families. Just
Excellent point.
today, I heard him mentioning downstairs that there was a man on the street that was asking him for $1,000 or something like that to get something to eat, and he was saying to us, it hurts him to know that we have so much wealth and it's not trickling down to our people. And here we have these multinational corporations like ExxonMobil swimming in our resources, literally. And this audit report, it's just US 1.6 billion. Just think about what might happen, what might be some of the findings coming out of the audit between 2018 and 2020. That is to the tune of $7.3 billion. So I just wanted you guys to think about that. I'm sorry for interrupting you, Kiana.
No, Davina, I'm happy that you raised that, because just on those 2 points, you have millions, multi-million-dollar contracts being sole sourced.
Right.
And then you have the issue with the GRA and the Natural Resources Ministry team having to flag this British auditor to say, hey, there's $40 million that was recovered and we don't have any transparency where this spending is. And that is just the tip of the iceberg. This preliminary report is not finished. Just keep that in mind.
Yes.
They're still going through the process of dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. So we don't know if much more will be uncovered.
Yeah.
But it is mind-boggling, Davina, that we are seeing this type of this pattern of unsound financial practices with 1.6 billion.
Yes.
And we have an ongoing audit of $7.3 billion.
Correct.
And this audit, and I don't want to go into all the different things that we have uncovered from this audit report tonight, because there's so many other topics that we would like to touch on. But Davina, this report, the manner in which we go about it, the approach that we take, it is going to be critical in the precedent that we set. And what I am more interested in seeing is the action government is prepared to take to ensure that ExxonMobil and its partners or subcontractors know without a shadow of a doubt that Guyana will not sit idly by and allow unsound financial practices to take place without any type of repercussion.
Yes. I'm looking forward to that as well.
That is going to be the breaking point.
Yeah.
Because Exxon, and Davina, you have a very interesting point that you raised in the newspapers with your reportage on this matter, on how we're sort of tied up in terms of the legal action that we can take. And I know the vice president has a press conference tomorrow, and one of the critical questions that I think he needs to address is how we are going to go about addressing questionable costs that arise
Correct.
in these audits. And Davina, I'd love to invite you now to just share with our audience what the contract says about the process we can take for this.
All right, so it's quite a mouthful. So I'm gonna ask you guys to give me your attention for a bit. So I was going through, given that we have finally put hands on this report and so on, and we have finally been able to go through some of these findings from our first audit report, I decided to delve into our production sharing agreement that we signed on to with ExxonMobil, and specifically to look at what it says about the audits and its findings. And, because I myself, not just as a journalist, but as a citizen of Guyana, I wanted to know, what is the process? How do we go about recovering these monies that are indeed that may be what might be the correct term, that are not appropriate, or that should not even be there in the first place, that it might be inflated cost, whatever it is. So from my research, reading through that contract, what I found is that the contract is saying to us clearly, if it is that if our audit finds that costs are there that should not be, Exxon is still going to be allowed to recover those costs. So until Guyana is able to prove to them and to explain, why those costs should not be there, they are going to take our money out, and we have to go through a long process of arbitration to be able to reclaim our money. So I after raising that story, publishing it in the newspaper.
But Davina, before you go on, because I know you want to raise the other fresh point, and as Mr. Lal would love to see, let's break it down a bit. If what Davina said just now didn't hit home, try to imagine somebody rob you, or your child, or your family member. 50% of what's in your bank account. And they tell you the only way you could get back this money is if you go to court
and prove it.
And prove that they actually rob you.
Right. So Exxon has to agree to Exxon has to agree to say, well, I can give you back your money. And if they say no, then we have to fight them to get that money back.
And you have to pay their lawyers in the process.
Correct. So what the contract says is that we have to go to arbitration. And so in the arbitration process, we would have to pay all the fees that is associated with not just our side of it, but their side of it, all the arbitrators and so on. We would have to stand those costs for the facilities, wherever these people use. However, if they decide to rent a hotel to stay at, all of those costs we are saddled with. And so I really wanted to point that out, and so that was carried in our newspaper today. There's another aspect of it that we plan to highlight tomorrow. Let me just share with you just a little part of that. I was speaking to a specialist from Trinidad and Tobago. You guys may be familiar with him by now. His name is Anthony Paul. He, after going through this, I thought, man, let me try to understand if this is what happens around the world, if this is an industry practice for these companies to just say, man, this is my money and I can just take it out. I spend this money, I can just take it out back. So I was speaking with Mr. Anthony Paul, and he said to me, Davina, this is ridiculous. He said, there is nowhere in this world are companies allowed to do something like this. They simply cannot get away with something like this. He said the normal practice, and this should be common sense, I'm thinking, if there are costs in dispute, then those costs are put on hold. Now, Kian and I, if we have a problem concerning this cost, you can't take this money, Kiana, without us reaching a settlement. So what happens presently is that you can go away with this cost, and after the settlement, if the arbitrators say you need to pay me back, then you will pay me back with some amount of interest. But he's saying, no, this is not so. What has to happen is that those costs stay there. And until we reach a settlement, then is when you get your money or whatever. He also stressed the point that oil companies, what they do, this is a strategic move. So this contract, it says that we have to go to an international body to deal with this arbitration process. He's saying that this is what they love to do because they're fully aware that countries like ours, we're still in the development process. We are unable to finance this thing. And so that is why these companies push for this international arbitration process, because it's so costly that countries may back off and say, man, I just can't deal with this. Let me just leave them. So he's saying what happens, and specifically in Trinidad and Tobago, what they do is the minister is the final arbiter. So he decides if the costs should be awarded to the company or not. And so in Guyana, we have given up that right. The government has said to Exxon, I don't want any immunity. So you have the power to disappoint these arbitrators, basically. So that is where we are presently. And the man is saying to us, this is just one of the ways in which, one of the flaws, basically, in our PSA, that existing agreement.
Davina, when I think of the full picture of what you say, I am hearing you saying to me that this generation and the future generation will have to accept being robbed. And if we want to contest the costs that were taken, the revenues that have been taken from us, then we have to go to court.
And pay for it.
We will not only pay for our lawyers to fight our case, we will pay for the lawyers of the companies that robbed us.
Correct.
And as you had pointed out in your story, this process could take a year.
Exactly. It can take up to a year.
In the meantime, they get to hold on to this money,
Right.
and reinvest it.
Yes. While Guyana gets nothing.
While Guyana gets nothing. I mean, I don't understand how we can continue to accept that this must be the faith for this current generation as well as the future. I don't understand how we can accept this. And what makes the situation even more frightening, Davina, is the type of auditor that we have. If we have our local auditors who, and this is not to knock anyone or anything of the sort, this sector is new to us. Everyone knows that. So we have our people who, with their own experience, they're able to see some of the things that are slipping through the cracks. And we have millions of dollars slipping through the cracks with this British firm.
Right.
Then it makes you wonder, where is Guyana? What are we doing? And one of the frightening things for me, Davina, is not one, how government is going to address questionable costs, the type of action they will take. And secondly, we have 2 audits, one for 7.3 billion and another one for 1.6. How are we taking the learnings and recommendations from this audit and incorporating it into another audit? And let's not forget, we still have the costs for Payara.
Correct.
to start auditing.
I was actually going to say that just now, that is while you were talking about your concerns and so on, what worries me is the rate at which we're going at, because government has said clearly, and you reported on this, Mr. Jack Dio saying recently, we have no apologies to give for saying that we are going to ramp up our production activities offshore.
Right.
So it's like we have been struggling to keep up with the sector as is, you know. And so how are we going to manage with more? How are we auditing to ensure that we are not being robbed? I mean, conducting audits is just one way of ensuring that you get value for your resources. I mean, our contract is already so lopsided, right? We know that our benefits are so meager. You know, and I won't even get into that because Mr. Lal usually stresses it, right? And so we know how little we're actually gaining from our contract. And so the least that we can do, I think, is to take these audits seriously. And if we aren't going to do that, Kiana, I'm not sure what we will ever get from our resources. You know, as more and more projects come on stream, it's important to know that we keep spending more. So it's not just about, we don't want to see growth. We don't want to see the sector grow. What we have been saying at Kaieteur News is that there needs to be a proper management system in place. So as much as you're saying, okay, I'm ramping up production, there must be equal effort to regulate and manage the sector.
Absolutely.
We cannot just be racing ahead with production activities and we're literally crawling, you know, when it comes to putting systems in place to manage the sector. So that is my personal take on it.
I got you loud and clear, Davina. And you know, I really didn't want us to go too much into some of these findings because I think we would need, it would need so much more time than what we have planned for tonight. But there's just one other finding that I think it's pertinent for us to just discuss a bit, and that has to do with the findings on insurance. Now, one of the things the auditors found, and just to remind that this audit is from 1999 to 2017. So during that time, the auditors found that there was no evidence that HES Corporation or CNOC had proper insurance provision coverage in place.
Wow.
No evidence was provided. Despite several requests for this to be made available for the auditors to scrutinize. Now, the only information that the auditors said they received was from ExxonMobil's affiliate company, Esso Exploration and Production Guyana Limited, EEPGL. Now, EEPGL and their documentation said, okay, yes, we have insurance coverage in place. But when the auditors checked it, they found that this company is wholly owned by the parent company for EEPGL, which is ExxonMobil. And that's all we have in place.
Wow.
An insurance policy from a company that ExxonMobil owns.
Yes.
And I don't know how we can still be comfortable with that, because let me let the listeners know, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has said that, you know, it's in receipt of a $600 million per occurrence insurance coverage. Now, we have no idea who this coverage was provided by, and we also don't know if this coverage was provided for by HES Corporation and CNOC. We don't know if they have satisfied, because the majority of the time the question has been premised on just checking on the operator of the block. But the auditors have also pointed out that, hey, Hess and Sinnock have not been in compliance with this provision with no consequence. With no consequence for non-compliance.
Wow.
That is the standard that remains in the industry, because up until this point, we have still to secure full liability coverage for
Correct.
the Stabro block.
Kiana,
up to this point.
I know you said you didn't want us to spend too much time
Yes. Go ahead.
describing this audit, the findings from the audit, but there's, as you were speaking, this story that you also reported on. I think it's very important to note, even as you're speaking about Hess and Sinnock, they have submitted some costs even before they became a signatory to the PSA. Isn't that so?
Oh dear, yes.
So I will allow you to explain, because I'm thinking it's just running through my brain, the fact that they have refused to give us any type of insurance while operating between this period. However, they don't want to. They want to claim cost at the same time. So how do we justify? And I'm gonna pass it over to you now.
Davina, I think, and thank you so much for reminding me about that, but that was one of the most disrespectful, insulting, egregious, disgusting findings in that report. How could you have the audacity to charge me? You were nowhere near Guyana. As the Minister of Natural Resources loved to say, you never stepped foot on this country. And you have a set of bills that you already have laid out for me, toward to $1 million US.
Yep.
You ain't do nothing in this block. Toward to $1 million US. You ready for me to pay, but you can't give me
Any documents to show
documentation
how you spent this money
to ensure that, okay, I can see what it is spent on and what is even a slap in the face. Davina, you did everything possible to ensure that you recover this $31 million in expenses that you racked up before you become a party to the Stabro Block PSA. But yet, you don't want to spend.
Exactly.
You don't want to put in the investment to ensure that I have full coverage
Yes.
for any type of environmental disaster or damage that your operations
Yes.
cause on our basin. It's unthinkable. And it just goes to show that we need to be so vigilant when it comes to these oil companies, because they don't care. They have no interest in ensuring that our interest is protected. The only thing they care about is their shareholders.
Correct. And like you were saying, Kiana, it just shows how disrespectful they are. And I think our government is very laid back on this matter as well. It's like we carried a story recently as well with them shifting this responsibility or full liability coverage now to the EPA. And Mr. Christopher Ram, he's an attorney at law, he has said that this is absolutely ridiculous. This matter of full liability coverage has to be dealt with by the government. How do you now shift such a major responsibility over to the EPA? You have to, as the government, stamp your authority and say, hey, we want you to secure these operations. Don't just shift this over to a little agency like the EPA. We need to get full coverage liability for your operations. So, like I said, I think our government is really taking a laid back approach. I don't think that they're taking this thing seriously. At the last presidential press conference, Kiana even raised it with the president. I said, Mr. President, an oil spill can have far-reaching impacts, and as a matter of fact, it can affect as many as 14 Caribbean islands. And this is not what I am saying. This is based on the ExxonMobil EIA submitted so far. his response to me, and perhaps I can get Mr. Lal to share that tape with you guys at another program. He was saying, we can't look at the bad examples. Let us focus on those good examples that are out there. Trinidad has operated for over 100 years, and we have never seen a citizen, trying to show the negativity and what can and cannot happen. We need to focus on what can happen. Davina shows some success stories as to how oil helped to develop other countries. There are so many out there. And so I think Ghana is moving so rapidly. We are pushing past industry standards. And again, this is not Kaieteur News saying this, or Kiana Wilberg saying this, and Davina Bagat saying this. This is what Exxon has said itself to us, that they have moved at such a pace that they have never even done before. And Guyana, like I said earlier in my remarks, as much as we are pushing ahead with our production activities, we need to see equal effort in regulating and monitoring our sector. We can't just be ramping up production activities and we're not taking proper safeguards. We need to make sure that these protections are in place. And something as simple as a signed parent company guarantee. If Exxon is so confident that its operations are safe, I see no reason why they can't sign a document to say we are going to take responsibility to cover any damages that this insurance cannot cover. They have been saying endlessly, our operations are safe. We're taking all these precautions. We're doing this and we're doing that. So why are you then so insecure, and why are you reluctant to give us that signed parent company guarantee?
Davina, the point you raised, it is disheartening that our leaders would take the position of saying, let's not look at those who got it wrong. Let's look only at those who got it right. The ones who got it right did so because they looked at the ones who got it wrong. Mm-hmm. That is how they were able to set themselves apart.
Correct.
Trinidad and Tobago, and Davina, you were there with me. Mr. Lal was there. We have spoken to so many stakeholders from Trinidad, and they all say, listen, there is so much you can learn from us because of how many mistakes we've made in this industry. Mm-hmm. The IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank, the World Bank, every time they give us a loan, they always outline the situation. They give you a situational report of the country, and they explain why they are providing this report, why they're providing this loan, beg your pardon. And in each situational report, Davina, both financial institutions always impress upon Guyana how easy it is to move from being touted as the fastest growing economy in the world to being right on par with those who got it wrong. Mm-hmm. Almost every situational report. I know it's but just for safety's sake, almost every situational report. Mm-hmm. And why do they tell us about how easy it is to get it wrong with this industry? Because those who got it wrong, that club, that group of countries that got it wrong, it by far 1,000 times, it eclipses those who got it right in the industry. And it's only a handful. It is only a handful. Wow. And the majority of the countries that got it right, they didn't get it right just because they are smarter than us. in terms of being the world's best legislators. It's not because, oh, they had some sophisticated, otherworldly technology that we just don't have any access to. No, it came down to one thing: political will.
Yeah.
That is what it took. Those countries were not afraid to look at those who got it wrong, and you need to look at those who got it wrong, because at this juncture of our history, oil and gas already accounts the oil industry, and we only have 2 ships in operation, and oil accounts for more than 50%
Correct.
of the economy. And we have about four ships already
approved.
sanctioned,
Yeah.
with the 5th already underway, and discussions are already for the 6th. Line of sight already for the 7th. And we're not supposed to talk about how to safeguard this country that will be led, the economy will be dominated by oil and gas. And we're not supposed to talk about the vulnerabilities. We're not supposed to talk about the risk.
Right.
We're not supposed to ensure we don't become complacent. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I would not stand for that.
And it's important to note the types of devastating impacts that can be had from an event such as an oil spill.
Yep.
Because it's not like, let's say, sugar, where if we have some sort of a flood, there are impacts, yes, but to a point whereby it can wipe out so much of your country's growth. You see, when we have an oil spill, it can be so devastating that it would not only impact our growth, but it can also have impacts on other Caribbean territories.
Absolutely.
So that is why we have been trying to get not only our government, but we have been even pressing Exxon at these press conferences that they have, to give us full liability coverage. So like you said, Kiana, it all comes down to political will. And so I recall recently, sometime last year, the opposition went to Parliament and they...
Oh, goodness, the opposition. Continue. That's a whole disappointing, but anyway, Davina, I'm sorry, please continue.
Yes, so they went to Parliament and they decided to file this motion to try to press the government to get full liability coverage out of ExxonMobil. Now, that motion was thrown out by the government, and it was discussed widely before. They threw out that motion. They said, hey, man, we just can't do this. It's not feasible. We're going to drive away investment. All sorts of things they came up with. Those MPs came up with. So Mr. David Patterson, he's the Shadow Natural Resources Minister. He was the one that filed that motion. And he said, look, at a press conference, a later press conference, they may have thrown out this thing, but we in the opposition are going to keep pressing to ensure we will not give up on full liability coverage. Now, since then, we haven't seen or heard anything from the opposition as it regards to the call for full liability coverage. In fact, I have seen that there's a woman's led group, Red Shred, that they have taken on this role now of protesting the office of the president at least once monthly to say to him, sir, we would like to see full liability coverage in place because this burden for our cleanup, our livelihoods, all sorts of things can be impacted by an oil spill. So we don't want to bear this burden. We want you to take this step now to ensure that Exxon gives us this coverage. So we have seen that group protesting at least once monthly for the parent company guarantee to be in place. I have reached out to the opposition and hopefully they give me a response soon as to what is next, because we as journalists too, Kiana, we have to ensure that we not just let them slip by. They are elected. They are our representatives in Parliament. And so we need to hold them to the fire, ensure that they are moving and pressing on our behalf, not just talking about the small matters. We need to ensure that these people are addressing our $1 million, $1 billion, $1 trillion sector. So I have reached out to them. Hopefully they give me a response soon as to what is next on this matter.
Davina, on the political opposition, and I'm glad that you raised that, because at Kaieteur News, we believe everyone needs to be placed under the microscope. Not
Correct.
just the government. It's
Yes.
not just the government
Yes.
that has to be held accountable for their action or inaction,
Correct.
but the political opposition as well. And every week you see these statements about racism, and you see these statements about all types of issues, and there is hardly any focus. Hardly, and let me just paraphrase that, hardly any independent focus from the opposition. And when I say independent, I mean not what they read from Kaieteur News from Stabroek News. There is hardly any independent analysis, substance, or research, or any policy position as regards the oil and gas industry. Yes, you table questions in Parliament, you utilize that route, fine, no problem. But the advocacy cannot stop there.
Exactly.
Davina, you mentioned that there's the Retroid group. They're doing their bit to protest and to contribute to the fight for a fair change and for a better environment, a better regulatory and legislative environment. But what are we seeing from the political opposition? And I just want to give two examples. The AFC leader, Kemraj Ramjatan, last week spoke about the audit that was first published and released by Stabroek News. Subsequent to that, he released the report for the media. Up until this point, we don't know what are the main findings of the AFC or its partner, APNU, as it pertains to this report. Not a single statement about findings that it has been able to uncover
Yes.
from reading this report and what it finds alarming. But we've had a statement from Ramjatan speaking about what was reported on in Stabroek News.
Like you said, no independent findings.
Then, and that's just the audit report. The government released in February the draft documents for the model PSA for deep water and shallow water. Up until this point, we don't know what the opposition agrees or doesn't agree with in this document. They were asked, I recall asking the AFC, what what is your take on the documents? And they couldn't provide an answer. It's the same thing with the APNU.
Correct. Kiana, if I may, last week's press conference, I think you asked the question about
Yes.
the PSA to AFC. So the week before, one of the executive members, I had joined their press conference. Dr. Vincent Adams, he was sharing some of his concerns about the PSA. They were related to the cost recovery of insurance, the fact that it can be recovered and so on. I don't want to get in much to it because I had to actually point out to him that there is a clause in the PSA that says Guyana will not be on the hook for any sort of costs associated with the spill and so on. So I don't want to get too much into that. But as it regards the APNU faction, at their last press conference, I raised the question. I said, have you are you ready to share some of your concerns, or what are your comments on this PSA? I mean, the 2 weeks period has elapsed. So they said at the appropriate time they're going to release those findings to us. I'm not sure when that might be, but that is all we got from them. At the appropriate time, they are going to share those concerns with us. Yes. So,
If that is not the definition of lazy, and I'll leave it at that. And when the opposition cannot fault anyone for thinking that it is just asleep at the wheel and singing one tired tune over and over about racism and elections and different issues. We need to get down to the policy issues.
Yes.
Elections is around the corner. And we're seeing that every single week we hear these statements, but we don't know what are the policy positions. We don't know that. We don't see the in-depth analysis. Up to this point, nobody knows what the APNU or the AFC would do if they're elected tomorrow. What would they do to strengthen the legislative and regulatory framework or mechanisms for the oil and gas industry? What would they do to turn around the industry and maximize value? Nobody knows. That's a mystery. So the opposition clearly needs to step up its game. Yes, it is using the parliamentary avenue to ask questions. It is making efforts to pursue answers via various committees. But the the advocacy needs to be better. The media is by far, sometimes I wonder if there is even an opposition, or if we just have people with different views in two different political parties, and they hold press conferences when they become, because this is not a government in waiting.
it's sad, as Mr. Lal would say, we're in trouble.
Yes, and it's very frightening, It's quite troubling. And just to go back to some of the issues that we've raised, Davina, there's so many issues that we still need clarity on, especially where government is concerned. One of the things that we have called for and we have yet to see is a beneficial ownership register for those individuals who are behind these oil blocks. Who are the true owners, the true beneficiaries of the mining the mining industry? Who are the people, who are the players involved there? We don't know, and we've been asking for this for quite some time.
I think this is particularly important at this point in our country, even as we are in this phase of auctioning more of our oil blocks. And so I think this is the opportune time for us to have this register in place, because here we are about to award 14 of our oil blocks again, and we have no clue who it's going to. The beneficial owners, as you said. So these are things that must be in place. These are things that we have to keep pressing them to ensure that that we have these transparency measures implemented. Josh, I believe that we're nearing the hour time. We've been rambling for quite some time, and so I would like to open the phone lines. If we have callers that are eager to come through with their questions, with their comments. Kiana, I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
Oh, no, not at all. Yes, Joshua, if we have anyone who's on the line or what's not, if not, we would go ahead and...
Well, let me just give them the numbers just in case they might have forgot. 226-745-324. Mr. Lal's not here tonight, so you can call us on those two numbers, or 622-2222. 226-745-324 or 622-2222. Go ahead, and as soon as a call comes through, I will let you know.
Thanks, Josh.
No
Davina, one of the important roles that I see the media playing is ensuring that this oil and gas industry has a very significant light of transparency. And I am pleased with the effort that we're seeing from Stabrook News and ourselves, and I'm hoping that we see more media houses coming on board, being more curious and providing more investigative analysis on the oil and gas industry. Joshua, we have a caller.
First caller?
Yes, first caller. Caller, good evening and welcome.
Yes. Good night to all of you guys.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. These girls are doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.
I wish if Mr. Glenn could let you girls, be more regular on this program.
Thank you, sir.
These girls, them talking the truth, nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
love
comments,
these
sir.
girls, I heard them look from the time these girls them start. I left this region got nowhere. I just listen to this program. Every single time Mr. Glenn is on the radio. I decided to listen to and share it amongst my friends.
Nice.
Everybody that is listening,
Wonderful, wonderful, sir. Thank you, and
Okay, yeah,
and
just
make
keep
sure
up
you
the
tell them
good
to
work.
call in too.
And hopefully next week or the other program I heard from these girls.
All right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you so much to that caller. We appreciate the support and the fact that you're sharing the program, the links to the program with your friends, and we encourage other members of the audience to do the same. This is a discussion where, we need the input from every person.
Right.
There's no wrong or right opinion. We are here to listen and to share, different perspectives.
Caller, good evening and welcome.
Good night.
Good night.
Good evening.
Can you come out and can you know? I just need to ask a few questions.
Sure, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I'm listening to the show all the time.
Uh-huh.
Now, my concern is Mr. Lal and the work that he's doing.
Mhm.
Now, Mr. Lal is a reporter, right?
Correct.
And I want to know if he's getting into politics.
If he is,
If he's
One
getting
person
into
got
politics.
If he's getting into politics.
Uh-huh.
Because the reports that we're getting, fine, all is well. But it's not just, the thing is not just getting them to do what he wants them to do.
I think-
If he's getting into politics, remember we have persons that want to follow him. As I mentioned a couple of nights ago, we should have groups. Okay, you're mentioning the red dress or the
Red thread.
group.
Uh-huh.
Right, we were mentioning that group. Now, if he gets groups, other groups involved, it's a force to fight them. My thing is, I mentioned the group and he asked why groups. No, if he just, if he just wants people to listen to him and not get
did we lose a caller?
involved with him, he has to fall group. So that we can be a force, and not just like it's a vendor between himself and Javio, getting Javio to do what he wants to do. No, we don't want that alone. We want to fight him otherwise. We want to fight the people otherwise.
I think
What I'm trying to get at.
I think so, and I'll allow him to respond to you on Friday. We'll hear from him.
I'm glad that he's that I got through,
Uh-huh.
and I want to know if he's getting into politics or not, because it's no use, persons are asking him if he wants to be telling them no, man. The other, no, I'm in it. Okay?
He will respond
And
to you
if-
on Friday.
If he wants persons to get involved, that knows about politics, he has to come out and say, what's his intention then? That's what I want to know.
All
What's
right.
his intention? Where would
All right, we probably lost him. They probably credit Fincher. But sir, if you're listening, you will hear from himself on Friday. We will answer for him.
okay.
All right. Well, while the caller did direct the question to
Yeah.
Mr. Lal, I wish to say this, and this is based on what Mr. Lal has also communicated to us.
Yeah.
The message at Kaieteur News, the effort of what we're doing, it's a collective effort that seeks to enlighten Guyanese about your rights and to understand what you deserve.
Yep.
And that is at the crux of what we try to do here. That is at the heart and soul, that purpose, that sense of purpose, that drive to inform Guyanese that, hey, you hold the power to improve your future. It is up to you to get up and stand up for Guyana, to fight for what you believe in, to lend your voice to the cause. So, yes, Mr. Lal is going to elaborate on that, but it's just for you to understand that there is no political motivation behind what Kaieteur News is doing here. Our focus is to ensure that you, the citizens, you are armed with
Knowledge.
the relevant information that you need about this sector to ask the right questions of your leaders and to demand that the actions, the right things are being done to secure not just your future, not just the future to ensure your livelihood is better today, but to ensure that there's a better tomorrow. The future
children.
generation is set. So please, if you think that there is, if you have any wonder or question about whether there's any political motivation behind what Kaieteur News is doing, please get it out of your minds. That is not what we are here to do.
All right. Thank you so much, Kiana. Like you mentioned, Mr. Lal will
Address that in
address
full.
that in full.
Yes.
Good evening, caller. Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, you heard me?
Loud
Good
and clear.
evening.
Good evening, ladies and
Good
Josh.
evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
So I was listening to the program from the beginning, and there are so many things that are coming to my mind, but I'll just try to make it short.
No problem.
Now,
His volume went down?
evil prevails when good men do nothing. And I say that to say that our current opposition fits that category. Because you know why? They have been failing from their obligation as an opposition. I don't know what is their definition of the word opposition, right? A political opposition. I don't know if that thing has been lost or they are just there like placeholders, occupying the other side of the table or the bench, so to speak. So I heard you say that you haven't seen anything like detailed analysis that they're making about the oil and gas sector or anything for the economy, as a matter of fact. Now that is so true because I have been observing the same. All that they do, they would speak anecdotally. For
Yep.
example, if you cornered them, seeing them somewhere, blah 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 blah, and they say something, and they done there. So it's just anecdotal reporting they are doing, and nothing comprehensive, conclusive comes out of their mouth. Because you know why? It's either one of two things. It's either they are just plain incompetent, or two, they are playing the game. And this game that I'm talking about is that they are just remain. They have actually chosen to remain silent, and there is some sort of thing that is going on. And I think the listeners need to make the conclusion what I'm getting at, read between the lines, as Mr. Lal would say, right? So what we need to understand is that I, as a citizen, a born person from in this country here, Guyana, I have my views. I would say this: the PDP should have been in opposition. They make a very good opposition when someone else is in power, is in government, right? Because we see from the last time what had happened, they were on their
I'm not hearing the
opposition.
call.
But what is happening now, since the table has turned and they are in government, we are seeing all it's going on, and this in particular, the oil sector. Now I heard you mention that the ExxonMobil has been saying that they are working according to their regulation. But what regulation they are working, they are basing these claims on. Look, for example, that FPSO ship there. I can't remember the figure offhand, but isn't it built to do 100 and something thousand barrels of oil per day when they are exceeding it by about 30,000 barrels? Is that following regulation? Right away, that's one case where they have breached the regulation. That's one. What about dumping produced water back into the ocean? What about the flaring? What about so many other things? What about the dumping of refuse on land here, right? So I don't know where they're coming from, but you see, I have been doing a little bit of reading, and from my little understanding is that ExxonMobil and like so many other companies like them, that is what they do when they go into third world countries, right? They go there because they know that the institutions that regulate certain things, they are either corrupt or they are non-functioning, right? So they come here and they do exactly that. The EPA, for example, is one such rubber stamp organization. And you say rubber stamp because nothing really goes on there. It's just a building with a few employees inside. And they sign a little bit of paper here and there. But we all know what is happening, right? So this brings me to this point here. I am thinking that we can rant and rave so much about this and that, like you and Divina has been doing so skillfully, right? You're getting the news out. But you know what is failing us, I think, and I am no lawyer. I believe our laws needs to be either amended or there needs to be new laws in place. Because this is the reason why they are hiding behind this framework of the whatever existing laws are there. Because nothing is there to implicate them, right?
Yeah.
In December.
Call is breaking up there a little bit. Let me see if I can call him back. Regular calls.
Okay.
That caller made some excellent points.
Yes, he did.
He said a mouthful in just those few minutes.
Yes, he did. And Davina, you wanted to respond while we're trying to reconnect with the caller?
Yes. I made 3 points that I would like to respond to. His first statement that evil prevails when good men do nothing. I just wanted to make the point, and he stressed the opposition being silent. I wanted to enlighten you guys that you also have a role to play as citizens of our country, and so this program offers you an opportunity to add your voice and to press government for better management. Is there a caller online?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're back. Yes. Sorry about that.
All right.
Go ahead.
Good. Sorry. Yeah. So yes, sorry about that. So the accounting firm that is here, that is handling the auditing firm that is handling the audits here for that period, I am not too certain if that firm is one of these accredited firm, because like to me, like I never heard of that name before, and I have no doubt. Let's give the benefit to the doubt that it is a regular, highly accredited firm and so on. But I have been noticing something here in recent times, that these companies that are handling the affairs of Guyana are some of these companies that I have never heard about, like the Blackstone group that was looking after the hydro project at that time. And when you look at it, I don't know what kind of a history they have in these undertakings, right? So it's kind of shady there. And I am saying that we should be having the reputable companies doing the auditing. Why would this government not want a reputable company to do these audits? Right? That's one of my concerns. Why they're always speaking, like, for example, that Canadian woman, Redford, right? I mean, out of the blue, somebody came from Alberta to Guyana, and she was handling the audits or something to that effect, right? We don't know who is this person, except we know that she was some politician at some time or something like that. So I am saying that the government needs to have they need to put systems in place. They need to have reputable people to handle these situations, right? And to look after the country's interests at its best. So I am saying that there should be a petroleum commission. Until now, there has been no petroleum commission. We have a GGMC and we have a GFC, among the others. why can there be a petroleum commission? But this goes to show that where this country, and as you use the word political will, it's not there to have these transparent bodies set up, right? And to not just to have them set up, but to give them the leverage for them to act in their capacity that they have the mandate to function in, right? So I don't like the idea that we have a vice president who is meddling in all the affairs of this country, especially we know that he's oil and gas. He was put there to handle that, but I am not certain if he's usurping certain authorities. That is something that needs to be looked at. And if it's so that he's usurping, that needs to stop ASAP. Because it's confusing the whole process, and this is where I think ExxonMobil wants this country, because they like when confusion happens, and we can have civil strife in the country and these kind of problems, and they're busy extracting the oil, taking it away. So there are many things that needs to be looked at, many things from the government level, and we all know that is why. Thanks to you guys at Kaieteur newspaper that have been exposing these things from time to time, and that is where I got the start into this thing. So I would like to encourage both of you to keep up the good work that you're doing, and to give Guyanese some sort of hope when you do this reporting. So I will leave it there for now, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much,
so
caller.
much, caller.
This was
Very
about
comprehensive.
I'll give you a chance to respond before we take another call.
All right. So one of the key points raised by the caller that I wish to touch on briefly pertains to how the oil and gas industry has remained clutched to the political bosom of this government. And for quite some time, several industry stakeholders have been saying that there needs to be an arm's length approach between government and the oil and gas industry. We should have independent stakeholders representing our interests, being that go-between between companies and government. And that is important because you need to have a check on the politicians. You need to have someone in place, and it's in place with all ministries. There's a reason why you have permanent secretaries. There's a reason why you have a layer of regulation within an industry. And the absence of a petroleum commission has been a cause of concern, and it's been raised, it's been flagged. Just recently, I saw a newspaper piece by Stavros News where Christopher Ram, chartered accountant Christopher Ram, as well as Anand Gulsaran, former Auditor General and a chartered accountant, both gentlemen raised the importance of having a petroleum commission in place, and the fact that we do face several risks by not having an independent regulator in place.
But Kian, I think it's clear by now that this goes against what the government wishes for the sector. I think they have made up their minds that we are moving this thing at our pace. And so we don't want to have an independent person to slow us down. And so we've seen them take measures. And like you said, by not setting up this commission, they have, taken a seat back to say, man, let's run this thing our way. We don't want people to manage this for us. We're going to do it our way. And so by not installing that commission, that's one way of them taking control, them managing this with their own hands.
Yeah.
And so outside of that, we've seen them appoint members to these different management boards to sort of ensure that things are run the way they want them to go. And so, that is where we are right now. And even, we like to knock the opposition for not playing its role. But I think what we've been seeing from government is sort of an approach from them that shuts out their voices too. We've not been seeing as many parliamentary sittings, and I'm not sure that the government is interested in even listening to any other advice that says we want to go another way. We don't want to go your way, Mr. President or Mr. VP. Let's try it this way. I don't think that they're open to these types of things. They're not open to constructive criticisms, and so that is why we see them taking this approach of attacking Kaieteur News and its credibility, and not just Kaieteur News now, but the independent press. We don't have much of these media houses in the country. Most of them report for the government. And so we have seen recently the vice president and the president, the government generally taking a position to discredit, to try its best to discredit what these newspapers have been trying to achieve, which is good governance. So that is where we are basically. And just quickly, I wanted to respond to something the caller said about ExxonMobil not following the regulations and them going beyond the safe operating limits of the FPSOs, and the flaring, the dumping. Kiana, I want to just tell that caller that the government is allowing this. So they have said to Exxon, hey, you flare as much as you want. Just pay me for it. So the government is completely okay with it. Yes, there are the environmental impacts, but the government has clearly said in those permits that they've granted, you can flare. Just pay us a fee and, you do whatever. And even with the upping of production, they have also allowed them to do it. This is in keeping with what they want, their goals and objectives. So it's a money-making sort of strategy. Josh, do we have another caller online?
Yes, after we're gonna call someone.
Okay, sure, no problem. As we await that caller to come on stream, just one more thing quickly I wanted to address. Okay, go ahead, caller.
Good night, go ahead.
Yeah, good night.
Good evening.
I have one question for you. Next time with the press conference, right? Ask him which oil country, oil producing country, has a success story. Them getting 12.7% of the proceeds, and the oil company gets 86.3%. Right? Ask him which country in the world. Trinidad used to get 12.5% royalty and 55% taxes, which is 67.5%. Venezuela gets 72%. Brazil, was last offshore in 2017, get 75.86% from British Petroleum and Petrobras. So please ask the president which oil country has a success story getting 12.7% of the proceeds.
Thank you, caller. We've noted your question.
I'm not finished yet. I just spoke to a cook working for a Trinidadian company. Right? He was on a Noble Bob Douglas on the drill ships out there. Guess what? It's a Trinidadian company gets a contract. Guyanese cooks get $250,000 a month, which is $1,250. Guess what? Trinidadian cooks doing the same job gets $4,000 a month. As well as the Filipino cooks or wherever. Working for a Trinidadian company. That's what they do in Guyana with our oil. Right? But you can bet your last dollar, right? They don't charge the oil company the $1,250 that they pay the Guyanese. They're charging the full amount. But they pay the Guyanese that. So the Guyanese people are being getting ripped off every which way. And do you think the Ministry of Labor is saying anything? What about the unions? Do you hear them saying anything? Guyanese in our country, our oil, getting ripped off, and the foreigners are getting the benefits every which way.
That's true.
Right? When are Guyanese people going to wake up? I'm glad you guys are doing a job, but one other thing too. Don't these callers who keep on calling asking Glenn to form a political party, that is not the question. The job of the media is to educate the people,
right,
to expose what is going on, to inform the people. Our Kaieteur's job, and it's been doing a extremely good job of it all the time, is to point out everything that's going on, good or bad, is to educate the citizens and let them know what's going on in the country. That is the fourth estate's job, is to, in the media, is to show what's going on, is to educate people, to expose whatever is going on in the country. The people's job is to hold your politicians accountable.
Yes.
That's right.
Now, if Glenn becomes a politician, who's going to hold Glenn accountable? That's what these people don't understand. Glenn is doing his job, which is to, as a media, the fourth estate is to bring the information to the guy and his people. Now, you have to take the information, do what's necessary.
Caller, you're absolutely right on every point. Thank you so much.
You guys are doing a fine job. You keep on doing what you're doing. But bring the hard question, and what the president did in Lenora, I would like to say that to the president and the vice president, any one of them, to treat the media that way is an insult to the country, the media, and it degrades your office. If you have nothing to hide, if you have nothing, answer the media question. You wouldn't tolerate that from any person. Why would you allow people to insult the media that in your case, you make yourself look bad, you make your office look bad, you degrade and you disrespect the whole Chinese people. That's what I'd like to say.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much,
Thank you
caller.
very much.
Thank you. Caller, thank you for holding. Go ahead.
Yes. I would like to highlight. I am a farmer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in my area, we have about 2 years. I am having some experience in farming area, and there is nobody to turn to. Nobody at our help. So I am trying to get to understand this spring. Presently, I am having a little farm, which the fruit are now getting shapeless. You know, like it is a disease. And when I look at it, it like comes from the clearance. When it passes with the air, and it will damage my coconut. Instead of the dry coconut fall, and after some time let us go. Now if you don't pick up the coconut in time, the coconut rotten. The coconut decay.
I think
I think that this comes from the flaring and the air that passed, because it happens sometime. And for only this crop, we get, for the past 2 years, we get a little good result in the rice industry. But what about the other crops?
All right.
I don't know what's really going on, and our government they doesn't care.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, caller.
I don't know. What I would like to see really is that these leaders, they don't care about us, so they just dump everything responsibility to some people, and they do whatever they want. Because we are having high expense in our agriculture fields, and our price for the product reduced in the rice industry, reduced by $200, and the expense gone far very high. Drugs, fertilizer, even labor costs, everything. And there is nobody, like for example the minister. I have a request for them to come in this area so as to meet with the people, and they don't come.
All right.
Okay, caller.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
contribution
you.
this evening.
I think that caller is sort of worried about the impacts, the environmental impacts of flaring, and he believes that it may have some sort of an impact on his agricultural.
I wasn't
yeah,
hearing
on his
clearly.
work. Yeah. So I think that is his concern about the flaring and the types of impacts that it may have. So thank you, caller, for raising that concern with us.
Do we have another caller?
Not at the moment.
All right, Davina, is there any other point that you wish to share with our audience before we wrap up tonight's program?
Yes, just for my closing remarks. So before we took this caller, there was another guy on the line. He was talking about the EPA being a rubber stamp agency. I wanted to just address that statement for a bit, because what I think we need to understand is that the EPA is just the agency that is operating with limited capacity at this point in time. And I think they are struggling to make those ends meet. And so here we have, again, another agency that is so in need of capacity building. And so this is, I do not want us to blame the EPA. I think we
and
should.
it's not autonomous either.
Yes, I think we should hold. This is another agency that we need to hold accountable onto the government, because they have a responsibility to ensure that this agency, the capacity is built so that they can carry out their operations to manage the sector. So let's not just beat up the EPA, but let us remember that this is an agency that is controlled by the government, as Kiana said. So we need to ensure that we hold government accountable to ensure that these people get the funds and the sort of capacity building that they so require.
I completely agree with you, Davina.
Yes.
On that note, in my concluding remarks, just to touch on or recap a bit about what we spoke of earlier, we spoke at length about some of the findings of the preliminary audit of 1.6 billion US incurred by ExxonMobil and its partners from 1999 to 2017. We spoke about these, the inaction of the political opposition, the fact that more needs to be done, and we also examined the absence of a petroleum commission, having an independent regulator for the oil and gas industry, among other critical matters. And I think those are key areas which we dived into, which we really got into for our discussion. And I am pleased with the contributions that we had tonight. I want to say thank you to those callers who were courageous enough to provide us with your perspectives. Thank you. And we hope next week that you join the oil and gas team to have your say, because that is important. Continue to enlighten yourselves about what's really going on with your resources and knowing your rights and understanding how you can demand better for current and future generations. Davina, as always, it's been such a pleasure to engage in discussion with you. I feel like I can call you my sister. And I'm always pleased to know that this conversation at the table is being led by two young women who are part of the media. I'm really proud of that fact, because we need more women to continue to take their place in society and to continue to lead this conversation as well. We can't just leave it to the men alone, you know? So on that note, thanks again, guys, for joining us this evening. We hope that even though Mr. Lal is not here with us, that you would have still been able to participate in a satisfactory discussion, an enlightening discussion. And Joshua, thanks again for moderating and leading us throughout this evening. Without further ado, I'd say thank you so much again. Davina, it was a pleasure.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you guys for joining.